Welcome to Midnight Rain Tales. The world sleeps, and the rain begins to whisper. In this quiet hour, stories drift through the night air, soft, chilling, unforgettable. Here, under the midnight sky, we share the tales the rain refuses to forget. Stay close and listen. The engine didn't just sputter, it gave a final shuddering gasp and died, leaving my little sedan adrift on a sea of asphalt, ribboning through nowhere. That's when trouble ceased being a vague possibility and became the suffocating silence pressing in from the vast, indifferent plains. But the true peril, I'd soon learn, wasn't the isolation, it was the illusion of rescue when the wrong hands reached out. My name is Alara. Self-sufficiency has always been my compass, the true north of my character. So when my aging import began its death rattle halfway across the sprawling emptiness of Kansas, I assumed I could navigate this minor squall. How difficult, really, could it be to limp to the next town, find a grease-stained angel in overalls? Exceedingly difficult, it transpired, when your vehicle chooses the precise midpoint between oblivion and nowhere to expire utterly. Sunset bled across the sky, that liminal, unsettling hour when the world holds its breath between light and dark. The road stretched, an infinite gray line bordered by whispering fields and the occasional skeletal remains of barns, long surrendered to time. I lifted the hood, peering into the mechanical guts with the profound ignorance of a scholar forced to read entrails, willing the metal tangle to confess its failings. Candidly, distinguishing a distributor cap from a dipstick was beyond my ken, and as dusk deepened into true night, swallowing the last vestiges of color, the prairie wind acquiring a sharper bite, I began to fear that ignorance might prove fatal. My phone, consulted for the 100th time, remained a useless brick. No bars, naturally. Just as I began calculating the dubious odds of walking towards an unseen horizon, twin lights pierced the gloom, approaching steadily. A wave of pure, unadulterated relief crashed over me. Salvation on wheels. I waved, a frantic silhouette against the dying light, feeling absurd but too desperate to care. The vehicle, a hulking pickup truck that seemed to devour the road, slowed, pulling onto the shoulder perhaps 20 feet behind my inert car. Its headlights sliced the darkness, pinning me in their stark glare. A man emerged, unfolding himself from the cab, tall, broad across the shoulders, clad in worn denim and a plaid shirt, a baseball cap casting his eyes into shadow. "Bit of bother," he called out, his voice possessing an easy roadside camaraderie. I managed a nod, a sudden, inexplicable tremor of disquiet running beneath the relief. Yes, it just stopped. Completely. You wouldn't happen to know your way around an engine, would you? He chuckled, a low rumble in the stillness, closing the distance between us. "Might know a thing or two. Mind if I have a look-see?" Stepping aside, I gestured towards the open hood. As he leaned over the engine block, the faint but unmistakable scent of whiskey drifted towards me. Closer now, I could see the slight redness rimming his eyes in the harsh headlight beams. "Yep, looks like your alternator's given up the ghost," he announced after a moment's inspection. "You ain't rolling anywhere tonight, I'm afraid." My stomach plummeted. Oh, heavens, is there a town close by, somewhere I could call for a tow? He straightened, wiping grease-stained hands on his jeans. Nearest place with a pulse is 40 miles, give or take. A jerk of his thumb indicated the direction into the swallowing darkness. But don't you fret none, little lady. Be glad to give you a lift. There it was again, that dissonant chord striking within me, a warning bell muffled by hope. His smile seemed stretched a fraction too wide. His gaze lingered a beat too long. That's incredibly generous of you, I replied, playing for time, my mind racing. But I couldn't possibly impose. Perhaps I could just try my phone again. Maybe walk a bit to find a signal. No service for miles, he countered smoothly, taking another step towards me, shrinking the space. Come on now, don't be bashful. Silas, don't bite. He grinned, and under the stark illumination, it looked less like reassurance and more like a predator baring its teeth. An involuntary step carried me backward. I truly appreciate the offer, Silas, but I think I'll just wait here, see if another car comes along. My fiancé is expecting me, you see. He'll start to worry if I'm too delayed. The lie felt flimsy, transparent. Silas's expression flickered, a micro flash of something hard, maybe frustration, maybe resentment, vanishing as swiftly as it appeared. Fiancé, eh? His tone remained artificially light, yet an undertone sent prickles across my skin. Well, can't keep him waiting, I suppose. Still, you sure I can't tempt you. It's getting downright cold out. I forced my lips into a semblance of a smile, fighting to keep the tremor from my voice. I'm certain, thank you, I'll be all right. He remained standing there for a long moment, simply observing me. I resisted the primal urge to recoil, to flee. There was an assessment in his gaze, the unnerving scrutiny of something weighing its prey. Finally, a shrug. Have it your way, but hang on, let me see if I got any tools might get you started at least. Before I could form a protest, he pivoted and strode back towards his truck. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched him open the passenger door and lean inside. And then I saw it. Illuminated by the cab's weak dome light, nestled amongst the clutter, was a chilling tableau. Coils of rope, a thick roll of silver duct tape, and the unmistakable glint of a large, wickedly curved hunting knife. In that instant, the vague unease solidified into icy certainty. Getting into that truck meant disappearing forever. Silas straightened, turning back, something clutched in his hand. I didn't wait to discern its nature. I ran. Behind me, his voice erupted, no longer genial but thick with fury. Hey, get back here! The heavy thud of boots on gravel confirmed pursuit. I flew faster than I knew my legs could carry me, lungs searing, adrenaline afire in my veins. But where to run? Nothing existed out here but endless fields and encroaching night. I swerved off the pavement, plunging into the tall, dry grass, hoping the uneven ground might impede him. I could hear him crashing through the vegetation behind me, his breathing already labored but drawing closer. Just as my muscles screamed for surrender, a dark shape loomed ahead, an old barn, its weathered silhouette stark against the star-dusted sky. My only refuge. Summoning a final surge of desperate energy, I reached it, hearing Silas's ragged gasps terrifyingly close. I wrenched the heavy wooden door open, hurled myself inside, and slammed it shut, fumbling wildly for a lock, a bolt, anything. Nothing. The ancient door hung askew in its frame, offering no security. Retreating into the cavernous dark, my eyes frantically scanned the space, mostly empty save for rusting farm implements and decaying mounds of hay that smelled of mold and time. The door burst inward, and Silas stood framed against the night, a terrifying silhouette. His cap was gone, revealing wild, unkempt hair, and the knife gleamed menacingly in his grasp. "Now, why'd you have to go and make things difficult?" he panted, his eyes shining with a terrifying mix of rage and anticipation. "We could have had us a real nice time." My hand closed around the nearest object, a long-handled pitchfork, heavy and archaic. I thrust it forward, the tines aimed at him. "Stay back!" My voice wobbled, betraying the terror I fought to control. "I swear I'll use this." He laughed, a hollow, chilling sound that bounced off the rafters. "Feisty, I like that. Makes the chase sweeter." He lunged, startlingly quick for his size. Pure instinct guided my reaction. I swung the pitchfork blindly. A small miracle occurred. It connected. Silas roared, a sharp cry of pain as one of the steel tines scored a line across his cheek, welling dark blood. I didn't hesitate. I bolted past his momentarily stunned form, back out into the vast, terrifying night. But where now? My car was a useless husk, the landscape an empty canvas. Then a fragment of memory surfaced, some true crime documentary watched long ago. If pursued, run towards light, towards signs of life. My gaze swept the horizon, desperate, there, far off, a faint, steady glow. A farmhouse, a lonely gas station. It didn't matter. It was hope. I ran towards it, ignoring the fire in my chest, the screaming protest of my legs. Behind me, I could hear Silas crashing through the fields again, his curses carried on the wind. The light grew, resolving into a house, an ordinary, blessedly normal house with a welcoming porch light casting a golden pool and a car parked in the drive. With the last dregs of my strength, I sprinted the final yards, screaming, my voice raw. "Help! Please, somebody help me!" The porch light intensified as the front door swung open. An elderly couple peered out, their expressions shifting from confusion to alarm as they took in the sight of me, ragged and terrified, with the hulking shape of Silas closing in behind. "Call the police," I gasped, stumbling onto their porch. "Please, he wants to kill me." The old man reacted instantly, pulling me inside, his wife already snatching up a phone. The door slammed shut, the deadbolt thrown with a decisive click. Through the window, we watched Silas reach the edge of their lawn. He stood there, panting, staring at the house, his face contorted with impotent fury. Then, as the first distant wail of sirens sliced through the night, he turned and melted back into the darkness towards the road. Minutes later, flashing blue and red lights painted the scene, but Silas and his truck had vanished. The officers took my trembling statement, issued an alert, but the chances felt remote. Curled on the elderly couple's floral sofa, wrapped in a quilt, sipping hot, sweet tea with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, the enormity of what had almost transpired began to settle, heavy and cold. If I'd accepted his offer, if I hadn't glanced into that truck cab, if the barn hadn't yielded a weapon, if this house hadn't stood sentinel in the dark, 6 months have spun away since that night on the Kansas plains. Silas was never apprehended, though whispers of similar encounters have surfaced in neighboring states. Nightmares still visit sometimes, sharp-edged and terrifyingly real. I find myself scanning faces in crowds, jumping at sudden movements. Yet, paradoxically, the world feels more precious. Each sunrise is a reprieve, a continuation I nearly forfeited. I move through life with a newfound caution, yes, but also with a heightened sensitivity to genuine kindness. The quiet, unassuming sort, worlds away from the predatory guise Silas wore. So, should you ever find yourself stranded under a vast, indifferent sky, and assistance arrives cloaked in easy smiles, listen intently to the whispers of your own intuition. If a shadow falls across your gut, heed it. Solitude is infinitely preferable to the wrong company. And remember this, the true heroes aren't always those offering the convenient ride, but sometimes they are the quiet souls who simply unlock their doors when a stranger cries for help in the night. Stay vigilant. The world holds sharp edges, but it holds profound goodness too. The vital trick is discerning one from the other. Lamplight spilled, a solitary pool on aged oak, my laptop its source in the library's echoing void. Midnight chimed somewhere distant, each stroke absorbed by the infinite shelves. Hours ago, departure beckoned, yet the dissertation's shadow stretched long, demanding this final chapter. Then, a breath against silence, a susurration, ethereal, perhaps imagined. It coiled, gaining substance, and a cold certainty bloomed. Solitude was a fragile illusion, shattered by a presence utterly alien to the hallowed quiet. I am Ilara, deciphering the shadowed corners of medieval belief. My quarry, the arcane practices whispered of in the 15th century. This archive, vast and hushed, had become sanctuary and cell these past months, a race against the calendar's relentless march. The work enthralled a descent into forgotten rites, but carved isolation around me. Night upon night, the great doors sealed others out, leaving me adrift among leather-bound ghosts. The quiet was a tool, sharpening focus, letting me dissolve into brittle pages, into the lifeblood of my research. Silas, the night watchman, drifted through on his circuit, a fleeting anchor to the mundane, but mostly the stillness was mine alone. This particular night unfolded like its predecessors. My familiar niche claimed, third floor, farthest alcove, barricaded by textual ramparts and scrawled thoughts. Time liquefied, dripping away unnoticed as I navigated chronicles of rituals long swallowed by dust, of artifacts pulsing with forgotten power. It was past the witching hour when the air itself seemed to prickle. A glacial tremor traced my spine. The distinct pressure of unseen eyes materialized. My gaze lifted from the screen, probing the shadowed aisles between monolithic shelves. All appeared static, yet the silence thickened, acquiring weight, a palpable tension. Just the research, I reasoned, dismissing the frisson, the occupational hazard of consorting with phantoms on parchment. I returned to the glowing script, but the disquiet clung like damp wool. And then, the susurration returned, a silken thread drawn through the stillness. I went rigid, ears straining against the quiet. Again, louder now, a sibilant murmur, syllables alien and guttural. Is anyone there? my voice a thin reed in the immensity. "Hello?" Silence crashed back, absolute. The scrape of my chair legs on the parquet seemed sacrilegious as I rose, the frantic drum of my own heart echoing in my ears. One hesitant step towards the towering stacks, then another. The murmuring ignited anew, insistent, fevered. It emanated from the library's deeper recesses, a siren song pulling me towards the unknown. Prudence screamed retreat, flight, the summoning of aid. But the scholar's curse, that insatiable itch for the hidden, propelled me onward. Could this phenomenon be woven into the very fabric of my studies? Was I teetering on the precipice of revelation? I navigated deeper into the canyons of shelving, the rows looming like ossified giants, the susurrations amplified, sharpening into distinct, though unrecognizable, locutions. It brushed against familiarity, Latin perhaps, but warped, uttered by anatomy not meant for human phonetics. Ahead, a heavy volume plummeted from its perch, the impact cannonading through the stillness. I flinched, pulse frantic. Drawing near, I saw the fallen tome lay agape, its pages alive with glyphs that coiled and writhed like living ink. Focusing felt like staring into heat haze. My eyes burned. A sudden, biting cold descended. My breath plumed white before me. Skin pebbled beneath my clothes. The whispers erupted, no longer localized but enveloping, a dissonant chorus of inhuman voices swirling, making the world tilt. I spun, seeking escape, but the familiar geometry of the stacks had warped. Aisles twisted into impossible angles, corridors dissolving and reforming under my gaze. I was adrift in a shifting labyrinth of paper and dread. Sheer panic seized me. I bolted directionless, plunging down random aisles, frantic for the anchor of my workspace, the mundane glow of my laptop. Each turn, however, only drew me further into the Escher-esque maze. The voices swelled, pressing, insistent. Their alien syntax teased the edge of comprehension. Forbidden knowledge shimmered just beyond reach, offered freely if I would only cease my flight, only listen. A treacherous allure, but a deeper instinct, the primal urge for self-preservation, for sanity, propelled my legs. Blindly rounding a corner, I collided hard with unyielding mass. A choked scream tore from my throat as I recoiled, convinced the source of the whispers had finally cornered me. But it was Silas, the night watchman, his face mirroring my own shock. "Ilara, heaven's girl, what are you doing so far back?" His voice held genuine alarm. Words tumbled out, a frantic cascade, the sibilant voices, the impossible architecture, the sigils that danced. Even to my own ears, the narrative sounded unhinged. Silas regarded me with a blend of worry and patent disbelief. "Ilara," he said gently, "you've been burning the candle down to the wick. There's no one else here. I just finished my sweep. Come on now." He gestured back the way I'd presumably come. "Let's get you collected. Past time you headed home." Protest died on my lips. How could I convey the shifting reality, the palpable menace when faced with his calm certainty? As Silas guided me back through the stacks, the world snapped back into focus. The aisles stretched straight and true. Books rested inertly upon their shelves. No trace remained of the labyrinth, the cold, the voices. We arrived at my alcove. My belongings sat undisturbed. The laptop emitted its low, steady hum, flanked by quiescent stacks of paper. A wave of profound relief washed through me, immediately followed by a flush of mortification. Had the isolation, the morbid subject matter, finally fractured my reason? Silas gave my shoulder a reassuring pat. "Gather your things, Alara. I'll wait. See you out safely." Too rattled to object, I nodded mutely. Powering down the laptop, my gaze snagged on the document displayed on screen. The final sentence I'd typed hours or perhaps an eternity ago leapt out. The codices warn of rites capable of drawing forth intelligences from dimensions adjacent to our own, beings composed of raw knowing who dwell within the interstices of language itself. Caution is urged for such entities. Once beckoned, resist dismissal, and the currency demanded for their wisdom is often the summoner's very mind. A profound chill permeated my bones. I snapped the laptop lid closed, my fingers trembling. Had my immersion in these forbidden texts inadvertently tripped some arcane wire? Had I somehow performed the invocation myself? As Silas escorted me towards the grand entrance, the feeling of being observed clung like static. The heavy doors began to swing shut behind us, sealing the library's depths, and just before silence fell complete, a final, intimate whisper slithered through the gap. "Breathe in my name." Alara. Weeks bled into one another before I could brave the library's threshold again. Upon return, the building presented its familiar, impassive face, yet the haunting lingered. In the profound quiet of late-night study, adrift in the stacks, phantom murmurs sometimes tease the periphery of my awareness. And the books? Occasionally, a peripheral flicker suggests they shift position when my gaze is averted. I completed the dissertation, though its trajectory veered sharply away from the arcane practices that now felt less like history and more like imminent peril. It was exhaustion, I insisted to myself. Overwork. The caffeine-fueled phantasms of a stressed mind. But beneath the rationalizations, a colder certainty resides. An event transpired that night, irreducible to logic. Sometimes sleep offers no escape, plunging me back into that fluid labyrinth of shelves, the whispers swelling, promising universes of insight. If only I would cease fleeing, if only I would listen. I surface from these nocturnal journeys drenched in cold perspiration, momentarily anchored by the familiar confines of my room. Yet, in that liminal space before sleep reclaims me, a faint, sibilant voice sometimes echoes from the room's darkest corner, calling my name. I have cultivated ignorance, erected barricades of denial around the memory of that night, but I feel it. A resonant frequency beneath the floorboards of reality. Something waits within those hallowed walls. It watches, and one day, inevitably, it will issue its summons again. My deepest terror is not the call itself, but the chilling possibility that next time I might heed it. Tuesday delivered the mirror. It arrived entombed in a crate of raw timber, my surname, Thorne, seared into the grain. Within the dim theater of my living room, illuminated by a single weary ceiling bulb, I pried it open, anticipating mere furniture. What emerged was altogether different. A towering glass set in dark wood, its frame a writhing tableau of tormented faces. A cold knot formed low in my belly. The detail was obscene, hyper-real. Mouths stretched in silent screams. eyes gouged at impossible angles, cheeks sunken like old graves. My fingertips traced the deep, sinuous grooves of one visage, a thrill of wrongness sparking through me, my pulse accelerating. I couldn't tear my gaze away. Necessity, not desire, drove me to carry it into my bedroom. It required hanging, and the hallway felt too public, too exposed. Who, after all, would willingly subject a guest to such grotesquerie? Yet it was inheritance, a curious sense of obligation, perhaps misplaced respect for the ancestor who bequeathed it, stayed my hand from relegating it to the garage's dusty oblivion. So I mounted it on the wall, directly opposite my bed. That inaugural night, I sought refuge in denial. Darkness swallowed the room as I extinguished the lights, eyes squeezed shut, yet the mirror's presence remained palpable, a heavy weight in the unseen air. I rolled onto my side, staring at its dark, rectangular silhouette. Even obscured, the carved faces seemed etched in perpetual agony. Nerves, I reasoned, work stress, half-remembered ghost stories seeding my imagination. Sleep, however, remained elusive. Around midnight, defeated, I relit the bedside lamp. The mirror offered a sly glint in the feeble illumination. Compelled, I stood before it, confronting my own reflection. Hair a tangled mess, eyes shadowed with fatigue, pajamas rumpled. I raised a hand, a casual scratch to the scalp, and witnessed the impossible. A hesitation. My mirrored self lifted its hand a fraction of a second too late. Ice bloomed in my veins. My heart hammered against my ribs. Again, my other hand ascended. The reflection followed, smoother this time, yet fundamentally off. A sickening lag, a subtle betrayal of physics. Was I hallucinating? Leaning closer, I scrutinized my reflected eyes, searching for the flaw. Nothing seemed amiss until my own eyelids twitched involuntarily. I blinked, and in that instant, a shadow flickered behind my reflection. Impossible. My bedroom offered no space for concealment, yet a dark shape slipped past near the mirror's lower edge. I spun around. Empty air. A chill radiated across my arms, my throat constricting. Dousing the lamp once more, I retreated to bed, finding sleep only to be plunged into dreams of tenebrous corridors and fleeting silhouettes. Faint whispers threaded through the night, their source ambiguous, dream or reality I couldn't discern. Morning rituals became an exercise in surveillance. Dressing for work, my gaze remained tethered to the mirror. Initially, nothing seemed aberrant. My reflection mimicked my movements faithfully. The carved faces leered from the frame, unchanged in their wooden torment. Perhaps exhaustion had played tricks on my perception, I conceded, with a shrug. I fled the house, lingering outside until well after dusk. Returning that evening, I settled onto the edge of my bed, observing the mirror. It reflected the mundane, the closet door ajar behind me, the nightstand, the lamp. All appeared placidly normal. Tentatively, I touched the glass. Cold, impassive. The frame felt alternately smooth and rough beneath my fingers. No movement, no anomaly. Maybe I had simply unnerved myself. After brushing my teeth and changing, I re-entered the bedroom. The lag returned. As I reached to switch off the lamp, my reflection's hand lingered momentarily at waist level before snapping into place. A dull thud echoed in my chest. I drew a sharp breath through my nose, feeling my ribcage tighten. Flicking the switch, I scrambled into bed, deliberately averting my eyes from the glass. I lay rigid, staring at the textured ceiling. The darkness felt thick, pregnant. Silence pressed in, broken only by the occasional groan of the old house or the creak of my bed springs with every minute shift. I fought to keep my eyes closed, but then a faint, dry scraping sound reached my ears. It emanated from the corner, near the mirror. My stomach lurched. A clammy sweat broke out across my skin. How settling, I told myself. A branch tapping the window pane. But the sound persisted, undeniably close to it. Reluctantly, I forced my head to turn. Moonlight filtering through the window cast a weak luminescence onto the mirror's surface. Something stirred behind the reflection of my bed. A shape, indistinct but tall, materialized in the glass. It occupied the reflected space behind my bed, yet held no counterpart in the physical room. I froze, my breath catching in ragged gasps. The shape slid sideways within the mirror's confines, then winked out of existence. Scrabbling from bed, I slammed the overhead light switch. The room flooded with harsh brightness. I stared into the mirror. My reflection stared back, perfectly synchronized, for a few seconds. Then, as I inhaled sharply, its lips parted a crucial half-second after mine. The delay, undeniable, terrifying. My skin crawled. Fleeing the bedroom, I spent the remainder of the night coiled on the living room couch. Dawn brought a stiff neck and a grim resolve. Over breakfast, I tried to banish thoughts of the mirror, eager to escape to the anonymity of work. Yet morbid curiosity, or perhaps a need for confirmation, drew me back. Peering from the bedroom doorway, it seemed almost benign in the daylight, an antique curio, albeit one framed in nightmare. I entered cautiously. My reflection advanced to meet me, perfectly in time. A wave, mirrored precisely. A small jump, echoed without flaw. Relief warred with lingering suspicion. I pressed my palm flat against the cold glass. Smooth, unresponsive. Nothing. I left for work, staying late, contemplating leaving a light burning in the room, but ultimately dismissing the idea as foolish. An irrational precaution against inanimate wood and glass. That night, the bedroom felt unnervingly still upon my return. Switching on the bedside lamp, I sat on the bed, watching, waiting. Silence reigned. The mirror reflected only the familiar. Exhaustion gnawed at my frayed nerves. Eventually, despite my vigilance, sleep claimed me, the lamp still burning. Hours later, I awoke abruptly to profound darkness. The lamp was out, the bulb evidently expired. The air hung thick with a peculiar odor, stale wood and decaying fabric. Had it flickered beforehand? I couldn't recall. Reaching for the switch yielded nothing. The house was utterly silent, save for the frantic pulse drumming in my ears. Then a low luminescence emanated from the mirror. Not a reflection, but an internal glow, its edges shining faintly like distant candlelight. I sat bolt upright, straining to focus through the gloom. As my eyes adjusted, shapes coalesced within the glass. Not reflections, silhouettes. Tall, vaguely human figures standing in a row, their features obscure, eyes mere voids in their featureless heads. Bodies like cutouts of absolute black. My heart hammered violently, slipping my feet to the floor, poised for flight. I watched as the silhouettes began to stir. The faint scratching sound returned, louder now. They shifted, pressing closer, as if testing the barrier of the glass from within. A glacial chill washed over me. I stood, legs trembling, forcing myself towards the door. A rustling sound whispered directly behind me. Resisting the urge to look back, I stumbled into the hallway, fumbling for the light switch. Blessed illumination flooded the corridor. Peeking back into the bedroom, the mirror appeared normal in the borrowed light, though my lamp remained dark. Reaching inside, I confirmed the switch was useless. Retrieving a spare bulb from the kitchen, I replaced the dead one. The lamp sprang back to life. Sleep was impossible. I spent the rest of the night on the couch, every light in the house blazing, my mind a frantic carousel of unanswerable questions. My hands trembled uncontrollably, my skin felt clammy. If the phenomena persisted, I vowed, the mirror would be removed tomorrow. My sanity was worth more than any heirloom. The following evening, toolbox in hand, I entered the bedroom with grim purpose. The instant my fingers brushed the carved frame, a distinct vibration hummed beneath my touch. Subtle, yet undeniable. I snatched my hand back, heart pounding. Steeling myself, I tried again, grappling with the top edge, sliding it free from its wall bracket. The mirror's weight surprised me. I braced it with both hands, the contorted faces seeming to dig into my flesh. With a final heave, it came free. I leaned it carefully against the wall near the floor, and then I saw it. The reflection wasn't my room. It was a passageway constructed of immense, ancient-looking stone, the image flickering, unstable. My gaze locked onto it. A primal urge to flee warred with a terrifying fascination. Movement within the reflected corridor, a tall figure cloaked or hooded, advanced towards the glass from that other place. Nausea churned within me. My breathing grew shallow, rapid. I let go instinctively. The mirror tilted precariously. The figure reached out in the reflection. Simultaneously, a soft thump echoed from within the glass. A jolt of raw panic sent me scrambling. I shoved the mirror flat against the wall, face down, extinguishing the impossible vision. I stood there, heart hammering against my ribs, rubbing my arms, trying to dispel the encroaching dread. I retreated from the room, closing the door firmly behind me. An hour passed as I paced the hallway, phone clutched in my hand. Who could I call? How could I explain a mirror that held gateways and shadowy occupants? The absurdity paralyzed me. Finally, deciding concealment was the only option, I fetched an old, heavy blanket. Back in the bedroom, the mirror lay inert, face down. My stomach twisted, but I managed to lift one edge just enough to drape the blanket over it completely, settling it back against the wall, shrouded. A momentary wave of relief washed over me. Turning to leave, my eyes caught a subtle ripple beneath the heavy fabric, a slow undulation like something shifting beneath. I held my breath, watching for a second, then fled, slamming the door shut. That night, soft, intermittent tapping sounds emanated from behind the closed bedroom door. I sat on the couch, wide awake, flashlight clutched in a white-knuckled grip, neck aching with tension. The tapping persisted, irregular, insidious. The thought of charging in, of smashing the mirror or heaving it out the window flickered through my mind. But the fear of what lay on the other side of the glass, of what might be unleashed, kept me rooted to the spot. Morning demanded a performance of normality. Breakfast, work, but concentration was a lost cause. Upon returning home, I found the bedroom door slightly ajar. I knew with chilling certainty I had closed it. Hesitantly, I pushed it open. The blanket lay pooled on the floor. The mirror stood upright against the wall once more, uncovered, and the faces carved into its frame. They seemed altered, deeper, the lines around the eyes and mouths more pronounced, as if the wood itself had grimaced anew. Gooseflesh prickled my arms. The air felt stagnant, heavy with the scent of damp earth and something old. I stood before it, maintaining a cautious distance. My reflection regarded me. Behind it, the unmade bed, the familiar room. For a moment, synchronicity held. Then, slowly, deliberately, I raised my hand. My reflection remained utterly still. Its eyes, fixed on mine, held an unnerving stillness, an independent awareness. My throat went dry. A tremor started in my hands. The reflection's eyes narrowed fractionally. A strange, tingling sensation bloomed in my chest, a wave of pure, undiluted dread. I took an involuntary step back. The face in the mirror twisted, contorting into an expression of palpable anger. A low, buzzing hum filled my ears. Suddenly, shockingly, one of the carved wooden faces on the frame moved. Its mouth gaped open slightly. I stumbled backward, colliding with the bed frame, collapsing onto the mattress. My eyes remained locked on the mirror. A scraping sound emanated from within the glass, and two shapes materialized. Robed figures standing in a dark stone corridor, identical to the one I'd glimpsed before. They raised their arms, beckoning. A profound coldness seeped into my bones. My breathing grew rapid, shallow. My head felt strangely light. I tried to rise, but my legs refused to cooperate. For a long moment, I lay there, transfixed by the beckoning shapes. They didn't emerge, but their silent invitation hung in the air. I thought I heard voices, whispers without words, pulling at my consciousness. Swallowing hard against the rising panic, I finally forced myself to move. Shoving off the mattress, I snatched my shoes from the floor and bolted from the room, slamming the door, leaning against the frame in the hallway, panting, heart threatening to burst. Disposal became imperative, but how? Too large for the trash. Smashing it felt perilous, potentially unleashing something worse. Enlisting help seemed impossible without sounding utterly mad. For now, it remains imprisoned in that room. The door stays perpetually shut. Sometimes muffled thuds and scraping noises filter through the wood. Sometimes at night, faint flickers of light dance beneath the door. I sleep on the couch. My back aches perpetually, and a constant sense of being watched haunts me, even here in the living room. What do they want, those shapes in the glass? Are they remnants of people or something else entirely? I only know they observe, their presence a tangible weight. Home offers no sanctuary. I spend as little time here as possible. My current plan involves renting a storage unit. I'll swaddle the mirror in layers of old sheets, bind it tightly with rope. I will force myself not to look at the glass as I carry it out, terrified of seeing that corridor again, terrified of the inexplicable pull it exerts on me. I recount this not for sympathy, but as a warning. Should you ever inherit an antique mirror, framed in tormented faces, should you feel that unnatural chill emanate from its frame, rid yourself of it. Do not hang it where you sleep. Do not indulge curiosity. It isn't worth the erosion of sleep, the fracturing of reality, the constant questioning of your own reflection. Since its arrival, true rest has become a forgotten luxury. I feel it waiting patiently for a moment of weakness, for me to finally step through the glass. But I will not. Inheritance be damned. Better to face the unknown consequences of disposal than the known horror of that other place. Tomorrow, the storage locker. Lock it away. Hope it stays. Hope it doesn't follow. Hope for sleep. Even now, faint sounds drift from the other room. Closing my eyes conjures the silhouettes, their silent, beckoning gestures. They want me closer, but I refuse. I will not look into that mirror again. This couch, this constant vigilance, it's preferable to meeting those eyes in the glass. There is nothing else to be done. My deepest regret remains prying open that crate, laying eyes upon those carved faces, that malevolent wood. It is too late for regrets now. Distance is my only recourse. The instant Alara appeared, a premonition should have sparked. A dissonance flickered deep within her gaze, something polished yet hollow. But the frantic energy of arrival had me, a solitary traveler adrift in an unfamiliar metropolis, starved for connection, blind to the venom coiled behind her welcoming smile. 3 days I'd spent navigating Bangkok's kinetic sprawl, and the city's relentless pulse was beginning to fray my nerves. The ceaseless clamor, the dense human currents, surging through the soas, the sensory onslaught. It was a potent cocktail, equal parts intoxicating and utterly draining. That evening, stumbling into the communal heart of my threadbare hostel, skin slick with humidity, feet bruised from a day dissecting maps and monuments, all I craved was iced relief and a pocket of quietude. Then materialized Maeve, as if summoned from the humid air itself, a condensation-beaded beer clutched in each hand, her grin wide and immediate. "Reckon you could use one of these," she offered, extending a bottle. Her Australian accent, broad and sun-baked, felt like an anchor. Gratefully, I took the offered solace, and soon words flowed between us with the ease of long acquaintance. Maeve, a veteran of Southeast Asia's meandering trails, possessed months of accumulated lore and hard-won wisdom. She mapped out hidden sanctuaries, pinpointed street kitchens serving transcendent pad thai, whispered of clandestine bars where locals sought refuge from the tourist tide. Hours dissolved into the humid night. "Listen," she murmured, leaning closer, her voice a conspiratorial hush. "There's this incredible night market truly off-grid, miles from any guidebook fodder. Food that'll rearrange your senses, crafts you won't find anywhere else. Fancy a look?" A flicker of hesitation. The hour grew late, fatigue settling deep in my bones. Yet Maeve's effervescence was a contagion, the allure of unveiling a facet of Bangkok denied to the casual observer, a siren call too potent to ignore. "All right," I conceded, silencing the small, insistent alarm bell, sounding faintly in my mind's recesses. "Let's go." We flagged down a tuk-tuk, the three-wheeled chariot carving through the congested arteries of the city with a velocity that flirted with recklessness. I registered our trajectory away from the neon glow of the center, plunging into districts where the urban fabric frayed, revealing neglect beneath the surface gleam. Maeve, however, maintained a seamless narrative, a vibrant tapestry woven from anecdotes of Vietnamese escapades and observations on the passing street theater, effectively papering over my nascent disquiet. Eventually, the sputtering engine died on a street shrouded in weak amber light. The architecture here slumped with age, paint flaking like sunburnt skin. Shadows clung to doorways, and the few figures moving through the gloom lacked the frantic energy of the tourist hubs. "Are you certain this is it?" I ventured, the landscape fostering an unease I could no longer suppress. Maeve nodded, her eyes luminous with a fervent excitement. "Absolutely, just down this way, come on." She steered me into a constricted alleyway, the city's roar receding behind us. Buildings leaned inward, suffocating the sliver of sky above, the air stagnant and heavy. Doubt coiled tighter in my gut. Just as I was about to voice a retreat, the alley disgorged us into a diminutive square. A sparse scattering of stalls displayed unfamiliar fruits and vegetables. An elderly woman presided over a vast, simmering cauldron emitting fragrant, spicy steam. This bore no resemblance to the vibrant, teeming markets promised in brochures. "Let's grab a drink, wait for it to liven up," Maeve proposed, guiding me toward a small, ill-lit establishment tucked into a corner. Inside, the air was thick with shadows and silence, save for two local men nursing beers in the periphery. We claimed stools at the bar. Maeve conversed fluidly in Thai with the proprietor, a burly man whose face resembled cracked earth, who responded with a grunt before setting two glasses filled with limpid liquid before us. "Cheers," Maeve declared, hoisting her glass. I echoed the gesture, the rim clinking against hers, and took a tentative sip. The spirit seared a path down my throat, blossoming into a deceptive warmth in my belly. Conversation resumed, Maeve spinning more tales of her wanderings. But time warped strangely. A subtle vertigo began to tilt the room. My thoughts grew syrupy, struggling to cohere. A glance at my watch revealed barely 30 minutes had elapsed, though it felt like aeons trapped in that dim space. Think I need some air," I stammered, the words clumsy, my tongue feeling thick and unresponsive. Maeve's features blurred, her smile morphing, losing its warmth, acquiring a predatory sharpness. "Oh, darling," she purred, her voice seeming to echo from a great distance. "I don't think you'll be going anywhere just yet." Ice-cold panic flooded my veins as comprehension dawned with brutal clarity. The drink, laced, poisoned. I attempted to rise, but my limbs refused purchase, betraying me. The room pitched violently, a nauseating carousel, and I felt myself sliding, tilting off the stool. Strong, unfamiliar hands intercepted my fall. Through the rapidly thickening fog clouding my vision, I saw Chai, the bartender, emerge from behind the counter. He and Maeve exchanged low words in Thai, their tones chillingly pragmatic, like merchants finalizing a deal. A silent scream built in my chest, a desperate urge to fight, to flee, but my body remained a useless vessel. The final image burned onto my retinas before consciousness. Fractured into blackness was Maeve's face. The amiable mask dissolved, revealing something calculating and utterly cold beneath. I swam back to awareness through layers of pain and profound darkness. My skull hammered with a vicious rhythm. My mouth felt like desiccated parchment, and a deep, bruising ache resonated through every muscle. Instinctively, I tried to shift, only to find my wrists and ankles tightly bound. Panic, sharp and suffocating, clawed at my throat as the immediate past surged back. Maeve, the bar, the insidious betrayal in the clear liquid. As my eyes strained against the gloom, shapes resolved into a small, stark room. The air hung hot, stale, carrying muffled external sounds. Distant traffic, perhaps, or indistinct voices. The creak of a door hinge sliced the silence, spilling harsh fluorescent light into the oppressive dark. I flinched, squinting against the sudden glare, discerning two silhouettes framed in the opening. One was Maeve, the other a man I didn't recognize, tall, powerfully built, his face an impassive, stone-like mask. "Ah," the man intoned, his English thick with an unfamiliar accent. "Our little bird decides to wake." Maeve lingered near the threshold, her gaze resolutely fixed on the floor. The man, Crate, advanced and crouched before me, seizing my chin in a rough grip, forcing my eyes to meet his. "You have become," he stated flatly, "a significant inconvenience. Your embassy makes inquiries. Your family rings the hotels incessantly, most disruptive." I tried to form words, a plea, a curse, anything, but my tongue felt swollen, inert. Crate emitted a short, dry chuckle utterly devoid of humor. "Do not fret. Soon you cease to be our concern. There exists a market for assets like you, pretty, young. Perhaps a factory floor awaits, perhaps a brothel. The destinations are varied." A glacial wave of terror washed through me as the full, monstrous reality of my predicament solidified. This wasn't mere robbery. It was the cold commerce of human flesh, and I was the merchandise. Crate rose, dusting his hands dismissively, as if shedding contact with something unclean. "Prepare her for transfer," he instructed Maeve curtly. "The buyers arrive within the hour." The door clicked shut, plunging me back into solitary darkness. Despair threatened to engulf me, a suffocating tide. How could I have been so utterly blind, so readily seduced by Maeve's fabricated warmth? Yet, as the initial shockwave receded, a different current began to flow, a cold, hard spark of defiance. Surrender was not an option. Ignoring the searing protest as coarse rope bit into my flesh, I began to work relentlessly at the bindings on my wrists. Time stretched, elastic and unmeasurable. Minutes or hours I couldn't discern, until finally a subtle loosening. With a surge of desperate strength, fueled by sheer terror, one hand slipped free. At that precise moment, footsteps echoed outside. Swiftly I rearranged my limbs, concealing my small victory. The door swung open again. Maeve entered, alone this time, holding a plastic bottle of water. She still refused to meet my eyes as she approached. "You should drink," she said, her voice toneless, devoid of any inflection. "It will be a long journey." As she stooped, extending the bottle towards my lips, I unleashed my gambit. Summoning every ounce of adrenaline-fueled power, I swung my liberated hand, the heel of my palm connecting solidly with her jaw. She staggered back, disbelief momentarily erasing the blankness from her face. I didn't pause. I propelled myself forward, tackling her low, sending us both sprawling onto the grimy floor. A silent, frantic struggle ensued, a desperate grapple where any sound meant summoning Crate. My terror lent me a savage strength. My fingers found her throat, closing, squeezing, until her eyes rolled upward and her body went slack beneath me. Hands trembling violently, I fumbled through her pockets, discovering a small, sharp blade. I sliced through the remaining ropes binding my ankles, then crept to the door, pressing my ear against the wood, straining to hear. The corridor beyond lay silent. My escape is a fragmented memory, a chaotic montage painted in adrenaline and stark fear, furtive movements down shadowed hallways, ducking into recesses at imagined sounds, the desperate search for an exit, finally finding a small window, squeezing through the narrow aperture into the humid night. I ran, heedless of direction, through alien streets, ignoring the bewildered stares of late-night vendors and stray dogs, until the blessed mundane sight of a police station emerged from the urban haze. The ensuing days blurred into a maelstrom of procedural necessities. Exhaustive interviews, strained visits to the embassy, tear-choked calls relaying the fractured narrative to my family oceans away. Maeve, Crate, and their network were eventually apprehended. The authorities informed me with grim professional detachment that I was not their first quarry, merely one of the rare few who had clawed their way back from the brink. The knowledge offered scant solace. Boarding the aircraft destined for home felt like shedding a skin, yet knowing I was leaving an indelible part of myself entombed in that lightless room. My innate trust in the outstretched hands of strangers, my foundational belief in a baseline human decency, these convictions had been irrevocably fractured. I still travel, still chase the horizon, still seek the spark of connection in unfamiliar eyes. But now a sentinel stands perpetually watchful within me, scanning every friendly facade for the subtle dissonance, the potential predator lurking beneath the promise of adventure. Because Bangkok taught me with brutal finality that the most lethal dangers often arrive cloaked in warmth, bearing gifts and open arms. This seventh-floor perch was meant to be a sanctuary, chosen for its modest rent, sensible dimensions, and a window framing the indifferent street below. The building itself wears its age heavily, floors groan underfoot, paint flakes like dry skin in forgotten hallway corners. The elevator cage shudders occasionally skyward, and lobby lights possess a nervous, intermittent flicker. None of it troubled me, not initially. I settled in months ago, finding a rhythm, until a fortnight past disrupted the peace. It began on a Wednesday, the clock nearing 10. Cocooned on the sofa in the dim living room, bathed in the television's cool, shifting glow, I drifted. The window looks onto a vacant lot opposite, a void offering little visual anchor. Consequently, the curtains remain drawn after dark, a barrier against imagined scrutiny from the adjacent building, separated from ours by a narrow chasm, though one never knows about prying eyes, perhaps aided by optics. Half submerged in drowsiness, I registered a subtle displacement of the heavy drape. Illusion, I first thought. No breeze stirred, the windows were shut tight. True, the old wooden frames sometimes sighed a faint draft, but never enough to stir the fabric with such deliberation. I thumbed the remote, silencing the television's murmur. Silence descended, amplifying the sudden frantic drumming beneath my ribs. I leaned towards the inexplicable reluctantly, but this felt deliberate. I edged forward. The curtain trembled again, a distinct nudge, as if from a hidden hand or shoulder brushing against the material from behind. Rising, I moved toward the window, my hand outstretched to grasp the fabric's edge. Before contact, a shadow, dense against the lesser gloom, resolved itself through the weave. faint yet undeniably present, larger than any stray object, possessing the vague contours of a human form, almost dissolving into the surrounding darkness. My throat constricted. A prickling sensation crawled the nape of my neck. Intruder, the thought struck, absurd even as it formed. The 7th floor. Access points. The front door, secured, and the diminutive fire escape window in the bedroom, perpetually latched and too narrow for any adult passage without considerable audible struggle. My pulse hammered against my temples. I retreated a step, then lunged for the light switch beside the sofa. Artificial brightness flooded the room. I spun back. The curtain hung, placid and undisturbed. No one. I strode over, swept the drape aside. Nothing rested on the sill. Outside, only the familiar nocturnal emptiness of the street. Rubbing my eyes, I performed a cursory search. Behind the sofa, in the cluttered corners housing boxes and a skeletal floor lamp, long unused. Vacancy. Sinking back onto the cushions, I wrestled my breathing under control. My phone displayed the time. Mere minutes had elapsed since the first stir, though they felt stretched, elastic. A tightness lingered in my chest. Exhaustion, I reasoned. Fatigue playing tricks. I killed the television and retreated to bed, attempting to expunge the image. A futile effort. Sleep offered no refuge, punctuated by visions of that silhouette, quiescent behind the thin veil, observing, tossing, turning, clock-watching, forcing my eyes shut. The night bled away into a gray, unrestful dawn that found me feeling utterly drained. For several days, normalcy reigned. I returned from work, banished shadows with electric light, nuked solitary meals. Evenings passed with the television's companionship, sometimes in shadow, sometimes not. An uneasy calm settled. Then came Sunday. Returning from the grocer around 6, laden with bags, I entered the living room to find the curtain distinctly parted, as if someone had recently peered out. Closing them fully upon departure is an ingrained habit, especially on weekends. A sliver of disquiet wedged itself into my thoughts. I deposited my groceries, approached the window, surveyed the street. Parked cars, a scattering of pedestrians. The mundane tableau. My fingers brushed the curtain. It felt oddly cool. My stomach clenched. I yanked it shut with unnecessary force, then commenced a methodical sweep of the apartment. Front door locked. Bedroom undisturbed. Bathroom empty. Possessions unmoved. Nothing overtly amiss. I sought out Mr. Silas, the building's taciturn caretaker, a man in his 50s perpetually engaged in sweeping hallways or monitoring the lobby's comings and goings. I relayed my suspicion. Someone might have gained entry. He listened, impassive, assuring me no non-resident had ascended. A faulty lock, perhaps? He shook his head, murmuring about checking main doors, stairwells, the elevator feed. No one unauthorized, he insisted, his certainty absolute. Then, with a vague comment about the building's antiquity, he shuffled away. Paranoia began its insidious creep in the following days. Leaving for work involved a ritual. Lock the door, jiggle the handle, check it again before summoning the elevator. Returning each evening, my first act was to assess the window. Sometimes the curtain remained drawn tight. Other times, a sliver of glass revealed itself. Not daily, but frequent enough to fray my nerves. I experimented, affixing a small piece of tape bridging the curtain halves. 2 days later, returning home, I found the tape lying innocuously on the floorboards. Impossible. No draft possessed such strength. I confronted Mr. Silas anew. A sigh, a familiar refrain. Nothing unusual noted, no unauthorized access past the lobby. My own inspection of the windows yielded no sign of tampering. Nothing. One night, I bivouacked in the living room, lights extinguished, television mute, lying in wait. Nothing occurred, at least not while consciousness held. Yet I surfaced abruptly around 2 a.m., a primal instinct sounding an alarm. The curtain appeared slightly parted. In the deep gloom, details blurred, but a distinct gap seemed to bisect the fabric. My heart hammered. A chill unrelated to any draft the ancient window frames might permit traced a path up my spine. I scrambled up, flicked on the lights, tore the curtain wide. Emptiness greeted me, the street below slumbering. Was I sleepwalking, losing my grip on reality? These were territories uncharted in my personal history. A cheap webcam, perched on my desk and aimed at the window, became my silent sentinel. Reviewing the overnight footage yielded mostly static darkness, punctuated by my own restless movements before bed. Then, fast-forwarding, around 3:15 a.m., a flicker. The curtain stirred. Subtle, undeniably so. The webcam's resolution struggled, yet the fabric rippled, and for a fleeting instant the impression of a hand pushing from behind materialized. A single fluid motion, then stillness. My stomach plummeted. I replayed the segment again and again. Not imagination. Something had been there. I presented the footage to Mr. Silas. A shrug, perhaps a draft, the building settling its old bones. These windows, he offered vaguely. Air pockets, you know. I pointed out the hand-like shape. He stared blankly at the screen, then at me, promising only to keep a closer eye on the hallway cameras. Frustration curdled within me. Relocating, breaking the lease. Solutions demanding funds I lacked. Explanations I dreaded offering my employer. I resolved to handle this myself. I scoured my apartment, probing walls, searching for hidden cavities, secret passages, remnants of some forgotten architecture. Nothing. I even pressed against the hallway walls near my door, seeking loose panels, anomalies. The building was old, yes, but structurally mundane, seemingly. Meanwhile, the curtain continued its silent dance. Some nights brought quietude. Others, while watching television, a flicker of movement in my periphery would snap my head around, only to find the fabric inert. Once, returning from the kitchen after fetching water, having left the living room unlit, I found the curtain drawn back a full foot, as if someone had craned their neck out to survey the street. My heart seized, hands trembling violently as I grabbed the heavy material and wrenched it shut. My thoughts raced, colliding, failing to form any coherent explanation. An inexpensive motion sensor, acquired online, joined the defense. Positioned near the window, its test beep confirmed functionality. The first few nights passed in silence. Then, Thursday, near midnight, a soft electronic chirp emanated from the living room. I was in the bedroom, hovering on the edge of sleep. The sound jolted me upright. My skin prickled, cold sweat trickled down my spine. I snatched the baseball bat from the closet and stormed into the living room. The sensor's light glowed, but the room was empty. The curtain hung, innocently closed. Bat raised, I scanned every shadow, every corner. My ragged breaths and the refrigerator's low hum, the only sounds. Resetting the sensor, I tested it. It beeped when I neared. fell silent when I retreated. Functional, I stood by the window peering out. Distant lights glowed in the building opposite. No faces stared back. A lone car swept its headlights across the pavement. The microwave clock read 12:07 a.m. I fought the image of the shape behind the curtain, pushing it down, though the tension lingered in my muscles long after. That weekend, seeking solidarity or sanity, I approached neighbors. Most residents maintained a polite distance, but the woman in 704 answered my knock, looking perpetually weary. No, she'd seen or heard nothing unusual, though she volunteered that the building's wiring was suspect, perhaps compromising the security cameras. Scant comfort. The man in 710, Hallway's End, recalled the building's past life as a hotel decades ago, mentioning odd fixtures in some units, but nothing akin to my experience. His gaze held a hint of pitying skepticism. I thanked them both, retreating to my unit feeling more isolated than ever. Upon re-entering my apartment, the curtain was again slightly ajar, perhaps an inch. Mail slipped from my grasp onto the small entry table. I simply stood, staring at the gap. A familiar tightness constricted my chest. I closed it, then performed the ritual search. Under the bed, behind furniture, closets, the utility space. Nothing. A headache pulsed behind my eyes, born of chronic tension. Sinking onto the sofa, I rubbed my temples, desperately seeking logic, finding only blank walls. My breathing grew shallow. I forced slow, deliberate inhalations. I decided to leave the curtain wide open, a challenge, an observation. I left it that way while preparing dinner, my gaze constantly flicking towards the window. The fabric remained perfectly still. Later, sleep proved elusive. Soft creaks echoed from the living room. Floorboards settling, perhaps, common in old structures, yet tonight they sounded like stealthy footfalls. My senses remained hyper-alert. Lying rigid in bed, I stared at the bedroom door, its outline faintly visible against the sliver of streetlight filtering through the blinds. My heart beat a heavy tattoo against my ribs. An hour passed in this suspended state before I surrendered. Rising, I ignited every light in the living room, scrutinizing the window once more. The curtain hung exactly as I'd left it, wide open. A measure of relief washed over me, followed by a wave of self-recrimination, foolish panic. Yet as I turned back towards the bedroom, a distinct brushing sound whispered against the fabric. I froze, spun around. Stillness. Approaching the window, I peered out. The street lay silent, the building opposite a dark monolith. My own reflection stared back, pale, exhausted, anxious. A sudden buzz from my pocket made me flinch violently, merely a spam text. My hands trembled. Extinguishing the living room lights, I retreated to the bedroom, locking the door. A flimsy, symbolic gesture. I left the bedside lamp burning and willed myself towards oblivion. Saturday morning brought a grim resolve. I discussed lock replacement with Mr. Silas. Permissible, he stated, at my own expense. An afternoon trip to the hardware store. A new lock set installed. A small, tangible act that offered a sliver of control, though it failed to address the core mystery of entry, given the caretaker's insistence that no duplicate keys existed. Still, I bolstered my defenses. New lock, fresh adhesive seals around the window frame, even a small rubber wedge positioned at the base of the front door. That night, I slept marginally better. Cocooned in a fragile sense of security, it shattered the next day. Returning from a brief grocery run, I found the curtain parted, 2 inches, maybe 3. My throat tightened. The new lock showed no signs of tampering. The wedge remained precisely placed. I surged towards the window, yanked the curtain closed, gripping the fabric fiercely, my pulse thudding in my ears. Then a distinct click sounded from the vicinity of the kitchen. I whirled, adrenaline flooding my system. Silence. I waited, straining to hear anything further. Nothing. Fists clenched, I crept towards the kitchen. Only the refrigerator's hum. Drawers, cupboards under the sink, all undisturbed. No forced entry, no footprints, no broken glass. Nothing. Returning to the living room, I collapsed onto the sofa, staring at the window. A tempest of fear and fury raging within. I entertained fantasies of tearing the curtain down, boarding the window shut, but knew it was pointless concealment, merely blinding myself to the presence, whatever it was. So now I exist in this state of perpetual vigilance. Each homecoming carries a charge of dread anticipation. Will the curtain be drawn aside? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes a fleeting motion registers at the edge of sight. Dissolving upon direct inspection, Mr. Silas maintains his mantra. No unauthorized access. The other residents deny any involvement. My options feel exhausted. Locks, sensors, cameras, vigils. Fruitless endeavors yielding only ambiguous shadows and frayed nerves. Every evening entering my apartment, my eyes fix immediately on the window. Closed brings a sigh of temporary reprieve. Open invites the familiar plummet of my stomach. What resides behind it, how it breaches my defenses, remains terrifyingly unknown. I only know that something watches, and I am powerless to stop it. I remain here on the 7th floor, taking each day as it comes, hoping for cessation, for explanation. But all I have is a recurring shadow in the periphery, a silent curtain's unsettling drift, and the chilling certainty that I am not alone. And so, things stand. In this old apartment, whenever that fabric stirs, I freeze. I listen, I watch, and I wait. I recall the precise second the awareness settled. There I was, sprawled on the sofa, a clinging dampness still radiating from my clothes after a frantic dash through the downpour. Wind gnawed at the window frames. A low, sepulchral sigh drifted from the corridor behind me. Perfectly normal, I assured myself, for a house of this vintage weathering a squall. Yet as my gaze skittered across the room, a twitchy reflex cultivated lately. It snagged on the leather armchair. It presented as ever. The bruised ochre of its worn upholstery, the cartography of creases and scuffs marring its hide. A piece I consciously avoided, never laid a hand upon. An intrinsic wrongness clung to it, a stale aura. It had been part of the legacy, this house and its contents, bequeathed by a remote great-uncle, Alistair, a man barely a rumor in my life. Disposal was always the plan, perpetually deferred. A regrettable oversight now, because in that instant I could have sworn its seat cushion yielded, compressing beneath an unseen burden. Invisible, yes, but undeniably present. My pulse became a frantic drum against my ribs. I blinked hard, attempting to dispel the illusion. Perhaps the tempest contorted the shadows, the inadequate lamp sputtering behind me, or lightning's reflection skittering on the polished floorboards. But no, the leather cushion, perpetually somewhat rigid, was distinctly concave, as though cradling substantial weight. I wrenched my attention back to the television, feigning absorption in some flickering late-night broadcast. Still, I felt scrutiny, the prickling awareness of eyes that needed no face. The fine hairs at my nape became rigid little spikes. I remember adjusting my position on the sofa, the cheap weave rasping against my skin, trying to regulate the ragged rhythm of my breath. A faint miasma tainted the air, something akin to old, cured hide, interwoven with the scent of disturbed crypt soil. Then came the whisper-thin protest of the armchair's springs. This house, I knew, was riddled with age and eccentricities, but this resonance felt alien. Perspiration slicked my palms. My toes curled instinctively into the coarse rug fibers. I fought to disregard it, but the sound soon sharpened, a subtle rhythmic creaking as if its occupant were settling more comfortably. Slowly, deliberately, I rose, a step nearer. Against my better judgment, some reckless fragment of my mind demanded verification. The floorboards beneath groaned their complaint with each footfall. I wondered absurdly if the unseen guest registered the sound. Reaching the periphery of the low coffee table, I narrowed my eyes. The cushion was undeniably depressed. Then, almost too slight to perceive, it rose fractionally before sinking anew, the motion of weight shifting subtly from side to side. My throat constricted, parched. No visible contour, merely the indentation, proof enough. Retreating to the sofa, my breathing came in heavy gusts, a tightness seizing my chest. Outside, the deluge intensified, a percussive assault on the glass. The storm's thunder seemed to coil around the house, a low growl. Rationalizations clawed at my thoughts. Defective foam within the cushion, moisture warping the chair's ancient frame. None accounted for the measured cadence, the slow, deliberate rocking. My heart refused its usual tempo. Sleep was an impossibility that night. Instead, I remained sentinel on the sofa, gaze fixed, occasionally flicking towards the hallway, the bolted front door, then inexorably back to the armchair. Interior lights quavered once, twice, likely the storm meddling with the antiquated wiring. Distraction became paramount. I retrieved my phone, thumbing through old messages, no signal. Predictable, out here amidst the brooding weather. The ancestral home, perched in relative isolation. Alistair's will had termed it a rustic retreat. I'd sought refuge here from the wreckage of a marriage and a mountain of debt, hoping for tranquility. What I'd found was this. As the hours bled one into the next, I tried squeezing my eyes shut, praying that upon reopening them, the chair would revert to inanimate normalcy. Each furtive glance confirmed the invisible sitter's persistence. By the time dawn sketched a weak, gray line across the horizon, the rain had softened to a drizzle. The air smelled sharply of wet foliage. My eyes felt gritty, inflamed. I stood, arching a spine stiffened by tension and immobility, resolving to eject the damnable chair. Not donation, I'd hurl it into the sodden yard, surrender it to decay. I strode to the front door, my socks whispering across the floorboards. Seizing the knob, I twisted. Immovable, strange, the deadbolt wasn't even thrown. I pulled with more force, leveraging my shoulder against the wood. Futile. The kitchen door yielded the same result, stuck fast. The windows perpetually sealed by age and paint. now resisted even the slightest budge at their hinges. Decrepit, certainly, but never before impassable. A nauseating fusion of frustration and dread churned within me. Returning to the living room, my intent was to shove the armchair aside, perhaps topple it entirely. But as I drew near, a sound emanated from deep within its structure, a profound wooden groan like ancient bones shifting in protest. And then I witnessed it, the backrest, its aged leather folds subtly adjusting, as if someone were leaning back, luxuriating in their occupancy. An abrupt, glacial touch brushed my left shoulder, like the pads of frozen fingertips. I recoiled violently, spinning, but encountered only the stagnant air and the ragged sound of my own panicked breath. Sitting again was unthinkable. I paced, arms clamped tightly across my chest, jaw clenched until it ached. Morning light, weak and filtered through rain-streaked panes, cast a jaundiced pall over the room. For the first time, I registered a faint discoloration on the floorboards near the chair's feet. Kneeling, I touched the spot. The wood felt unnaturally cold, and rubbing my fingertips together left a faint, greasy residue. I wiped my hand on my jeans, revulsion and fear coiling tighter in my gut. Information. I needed context. Perhaps something resided in Alistair's dusty archives. He'd left crates of paperwork in the cramped storage closet. I burrowed through them, sifting past brittle receipts, letters, faded photographs. Nothing explicitly concerning the chair emerged, until I unearthed a snapshot of this very room, dated decades prior. The identical armchair occupied the precise same location. A man sat within it, his features obscured by the photograph's age and inadequate lighting, yet a stern countenance, a rigid posture were discernible. On the reverse, inscribed in my great-uncle's spidery script, were 4 words: "Don't move it, ever." A tremor traced its path down my spine. From the hallway's threshold, I glanced towards the chair. I could just discern the curve of its backrest, utterly still yet profoundly inhabited. The house timber whined, as if in derision. "Don't move it!" The phrase echoed, reverberated in my skull. Had Alistair known? Was this inheritance a curse disguised as a gift? My fists tightened, my heart hammered against my ribs. The odor was stronger now, that blend of old hide underscored by something acrid, vaguely sour. By midday, exhaustion gnawed at me. I attempted to rest on the sofa again, but each time I settled, the chilling proximity behind me reasserted itself. Once I could have sworn something ethereal brushed my hair aside, a delicate caress like a skeletal hand grazing my scalp. I sprang up, cracking my knee against the coffee table, a curse tearing from my throat. The chair remained impassive, its cushion molded around the unseen form. Tears, born of pain and terror, pricked my eyes. In desperation, I resolved to shroud the chair. Locating an old white sheet in a linen drawer, I approached with excruciating slowness. The bare wood beneath my feet felt like slabs of ice. As I cast the sheet towards the armchair, it snagged mid-flight on emptiness, as if catching upon an incorporeal shoulder. A strangled gasp escaped me as I tugged, forcing the fabric downward. It draped unevenly, yet for a fleeting, heart-stopping moment I perceived it. A faint suggestion of form beneath the white expanse, a bulky, slumped human shape. My heart pounded with such violence I felt unsteady on my feet. Then, as I stared, transfixed, the sheet dipped where a head might be, tilting upwards as if regarding me. I stumbled back, and the sheet slithered off of its own accord, collapsing silently onto the floorboards. I fled to the front door, yanking, screaming, kicking at the unyielding wood. I assaulted a window. It refused to yield. The phone remained inert. The electricity flickered, plunging the room into momentary darkness before sputtering back to life. The house itself seemed to hum, vibrating with a held breath. Evening descended, drawing the shadows long and thin across the floor. I found myself whispering to the presence, pleading aloud, "What is it you want?" My voice sounded thin, alien. I circled the room, illuminated only by a solitary lamp in the far corner. The armchair's leather gleamed faintly, accentuating the dents, the scratches. Had they always appeared so deep? The notion of fire surfaced. I hurried to the kitchen, fumbling for a box of matches. My hands shook so violently that half the sticks scattered across the linoleum. Returning, I stood before the chair, struck a match. The tiny flame wavered, the presence remained inert. I edged the flame closer, but a sudden, inexplicable puff of cold air extinguished it. Another match met the same fate. It was as if something gently exhaled from within the invisible occupant, a calm assertion of dominion. A wave of profound nausea washed over me. I staggered towards the bathroom, retching into the basin, splashing cold water onto my face. I met my reflection, eyes wide and stark, forehead slick with sweat, the stubble on my jaw appearing unnaturally dark. As my gaze lingered in the mirror, I swore I detected movement behind me, a nebulous silhouette hovering in the doorway. I spun around. Nothing. Yet the reflection, for the split second before I turned, had shown a vague configuration of head and shoulders materializing near the bathroom's frame. Heart hammering a frantic tattoo, I eased back into the hallway, moving with exaggerated stealth. The house felt altered now, the walls subtly leaning inwards. Back in the living room, I registered something new. The armchair had rotated slightly, no longer oriented towards the inert television. It was angled more towards my position. The floorboards groaned under my cautious weight, and that sour, musky scent intensified. An image flared. The photograph. The stern-faced man. Was it him? Still tethered here? Trapped? Night fell with brutal finality, heralded by a renewed onslaught of rain drumming insistently against the glass. I resumed my pacing, massaging temples that throbbed with tension. My legs felt unreliable, and a sharp ache lodged itself between my shoulder blades. Each time my gaze was unwillingly drawn to the chair, I perceived infinitesimal shifts, the leather seeming to ripple, almost breathing. I attempted to shove the coffee table aside, but it jammed against a warped floorboard. Frustration detonated within me. I yelled, voice cracking, "Leave me alone." The sole reply was a soft, almost polite squeak from the chair's springs. My knees buckled and I collapsed onto the sofa. Instantly, something gripped my shoulder, firm, solid, and icily cold. I screamed, lurching forward, finding only empty air. The pressure vanished, but left a residual chill that spread through my muscles, inducing uncontrollable tremors. Time became elastic, stretching and contracting. My eyelids felt weighted, yet true rest remained elusive. Each time consciousness threatened to fray, a soft susurrus would intrude, like leather whispering unintelligible secrets. Once, steeling myself, I looked directly at the chair, then shifted my focus to the glass door of the display cabinet positioned behind it. There, caught in the reflective surface, was a faint silhouette. Just a suggestion, really. A broad head, wide shoulders, hands seemingly gripping the armrests. I froze, pulse thundering in my ears. The reflection seemed momentarily more substantial, blurred but undeniably there. When I looked back at the chair itself, nothing tangible manifested, only the persistent indentation. As the hours crawled onward, my thoughts devolved into a frantic spiral. Escape, freedom. I even seized a dining chair, intending to shatter a window, but the glass resisted my blows like solid rock. Turning back, defeated, I found the armchair had pivoted again, now confronting me almost squarely. Its unseen gaze, if it possessed one, was inescapable. It dominated the space, pinning me beneath its silent scrutiny, watched, judged, immobilized. Eventually, the stark realization dawned. This was unwinnable. The house held me captive. The chair refused to relinquish its spectral grip. I slid to the floor, breath catching in ragged gasps, tears stinging my eyes. Outside, the storm raged unabated. Inside, I was ensnared in a silent, unequal conflict. My mind churned. Feign sleep? Offer some form of submission? In the final torturous hours preceding dawn, I slumped against the wall, my body racked with silent, exhausted sobs. Lifting my heavy head, I risked one last glance at the cabinet's glass door. The silhouette materialized with startling clarity, just for an instant. A substantial figure leaning forward, seeming to scrutinize me with a dark, intense curiosity. I blinked, and it dissolved, leaving only the mundane reflection of the empty room. But the discrepancy disturbed me profoundly. The reflection showed an unoccupied chair, while the actual cushion still bore its invisible weight. It felt like a cruel mockery, the glass revealing what should be, while I endured what was. Dawn's pallid gray light seeped through the windows. My lips felt cracked, my throat raw. I tried the front door one final time. On this occasion, the knob turned freely. The door swung inward without resistance. Outside, the world appeared startlingly ordinary. Sodden grass, distant dripping trees, a washed-out sky. I hauled myself out, stumbling several steps into the muddy yard. Glancing back, I saw the armchair framed within the doorway. For a heartbeat, I imagined a flicker of movement within its depths, but I wrenched my gaze away, heart pounding, and slammed the door shut. I never re-entered that house. The property was abandoned, my car carrying me away as soon as its engine sputtered to life. In the days that followed, innocuous noises made me flinch. I found myself constantly checking over my shoulder for a presence that logically wasn't there. Catching my reflection in shop windows sometimes triggered a jolt of fear, the fleeting impression of something indistinct lurking just behind my image. My skin retains a subtle coolness, as if perpetually remembering phantom fingers. Even now, writing this from the confines of a sterile motel room, I perceive faint shapes coalescing in polished surfaces, hints of what might have latched onto me. The memory of that armchair, of its unseen occupant, is a palpable weight. When I close my eyes, I feel again the cold pressure on my shoulder, hear the complaining creak of aged leather. I know I fled that house, but I am far from certain I left it empty. Some presence lingers, its grip tenacious, and I live with the dread that the next time I glimpse my own reflection, I will see it staring back from just behind me. The descent into the manor's foundations promised only desiccation and stillness, not this clandestine universe of timber and iron. A miasma hung thick, redolent of forgotten newsprint, languishing in damp obscurity. My torchlight sliced through the gloom, illuminating strata of shelving laden with volumes, each spine obscured by layers of grime. These stacks soared into an oppressive darkness my beam couldn't penetrate. Squinting revealed no ceiling, only an infinite pitch. A disquiet settled in my gut, the sensation of trespassing upon secrets never meant for mortal eyes. My ribcage tightened. A frantic pulse hammered against my eardrums. My purpose here, amidst the decay of this ancestral home, was the pursuit of scarce manuscripts. Whispers in the nearby village spoke of the former occupants, collectors of the bizarre and the esoteric. Most dismissed it as fanciful folklore, yet the allure of verification proved irresistible. Shoving aside splintered crates and water-stained boxes, my eye caught a furtive gleam of aged metal behind a fractured armoire. I anticipated a chest, perhaps a vault. What confronted me was an immense oaken door embedded within the stone, secured by colossal hinges and dominated by a handle wrought into the shape of a coiled worm. It radiated an antiquity far exceeding its surroundings. It resisted my pull, locked fast. A brief search unearthed an iron key, suspended from a nail beneath a shelf, succumbing to rot. With a hesitant turn, the lock yielded. The door groaned open, the sound reverberating through the cellar like a drawn-out lament, loosing a chill draft that caressed my bare arms. Beyond that threshold, a cramped flight of stone steps plunged downward into a vast chamber. Sweeping my light across the expanse, I grasped the impossible reality, a subterranean scriptorium. Walls vanished beneath shelves that climbed from the flagstone floor toward unseen heights. The air tasted of mildew and something indefinable, perhaps the ghosts of ancient leather bindings. Books of incongruous sizes and forms crowded every available space, some piled haphazardly, others shrouded in decaying cloth. At the chamber's far extremity, a barricaded alcove beckoned, secured by lengths of rusted chain. The links, thick as a man's thumb, crisscrossed a heavy wooden double door. My footsteps echoed unnervingly on the stone as I approached. Touching the chains left a gritty rime of orange corrosion on my palms. They clanked with a hollow finality. The padlock looked primordial. From my pack, I withdrew a small pry bar, a standard precaution for navigating derelict structures and their stubborn barriers. A few sharp impacts, a jarring metallic crack that frayed my nerves, and the ancient lock surrendered. I drew a steadying breath, cast the heavy chains aside. My torch flickered erratically. A sharp tap restored its steady beam. The passage revealed beyond was suffocatingly narrow, barely allowing forward progress without scraping my shoulders. Its walls were punctuated by small niches, each cradling a solitary book or a sheaf of brittle papers. Gossamer strands of cobwebs drifted from the low ceiling. A tremor traced my spine as I crossed the threshold. The deeper I ventured, the more the markings on the book spines arrested my attention. They belonged to no alphabet I knew. Some appeared as crudely incised sigils, Others, like ink drawings, faded to a desiccated brown. Running a finger across one cover revealed a strange, uneven texture, as if blistered by fire in places. The ambient temperature seemed to plummet. My own breath plumed faintly visible. Silence reigned, broken only by the rhythmic echo of my own tread and the distant, melancholic drip of unseen water. Perhaps 10 feet in, the corridor widened into a small, stark room, dominated by a central stone table. Loose pages lay scattered upon its surface, partially veiled by a dust-laden cloth. Lifting the covering unveiled sketches of entities defying all natural taxonomy, creatures with grotesquely elongated limbs, faces devoid of features or a surfeit of vacant eyes. Some possessed anatomies so warped, so fundamentally wrong that my stomach clenched. The linework was coarse, frantic, born of haste or terror. Instinct screamed retreat, yet curiosity, that fatal human flaw, compelled me to lift a single sheet. Its corners bore dark, flaking stains. As I angled it into the torchlight, a jolt, sharp and cold, shot through my chest. The depicted thing possessed a gaping maw where its eyes should have been, and a solitary, staring orb in place of a mouth. Carefully, I replaced the horrific page, my gaze sweeping the confined space. A few volumes rested upon a stone pedestal against the far wall. The uppermost book was bound in thick, dark leather, its cover emblazoned with a central symbol, an inverted triangle spewing jagged lines from each vertex. My hand, betraying me with a slight tremor, reached out and opened it. The text within mirrored the cryptic script from the corridor. Characters slanted at angles that strained the eyes. Flipping through brittle pages revealed further illustrations, some rendered with such unnerving detail that my throat constricted. They seemed imbued with a latent animation, poised to writhe free from the parchment should my stare linger too long. Swallowing against a sudden dryness, I closed the tome, stepping back. My torch flickered once more. In that brief dimness, I thought I detected a faint susurration, perhaps the disturbed cloth settling near my feet, perhaps not. The passage behind me seemed to have deepened its shadows, contracting, shoving the scattered pages aside with revulsion. Unwilling to look further, I felt my heart pound against my ribs. A prickly heat spread across my arms. My shirt clung damply to my back. Enough. I turned and retraced my path, hurrying past the towering shelves of the impossible library, ascending the stairs, emerging back into the familiar, albeit still unsettling basement. Later that night, cocooned in the perceived safety of my home, I sought solace in routine. Coffee brewed, steaming aromatically on my kitchen table. I tried to anchor myself with thoughts of the subterranean archive. Who conceived such a place? Who curated its arcane contents? Why the chains, the secrecy? Attempting distraction, I opened a familiar hardcover, a dry volume on regional history, hoping its mundane text would soothe my agitated mind. Yet, after only a few pages, faint pencil markings emerged in the margins. Vestiges of a previous reader, I assumed initially. Then a cold recognition prickled my skin. Some symbols echoed those seen in the corridor's niches. My chest constricted anew. Flipping ahead confirmed my fear. More scribbles, faint as whispers, lines looping and twisting in patterns utterly alien to conventional handwriting. I snapped the book shut, setting it down with a thud. A sensation like swallowed ice spread through my gut. The phenomenon intensified over the ensuing days. Every book I touched regardless of its provenance or how long I'd owned it, bore the taint. Some revealed brief lines of the unreadable script. Others harbored small, furtive drawings reminiscent of the monstrous sketches. Occasionally, a page held only a single solitary sigil, scratched into a corner. Rubbing with the thumb proved futile. The marks were intrinsic, fused with the very fibers of the paper. My skin crawled with each new discovery. The urge to purge my collection warred with a deeper, inexplicable reluctance. One evening, driven by a desperate need for understanding, I resolved to meticulously document the intrusions. Notebook open, I began transcribing each alien glyph, each bizarre annotation onto clean sheets. The initial symbols seemed random, disconnected, but gradually, amidst the chaos, repetitions emerged. There it was again, the inverted triangle identical to the one on the leather-bound volume from the hidden room, its vertices spitting lines. My pulse quickened. Dismissing it as overwrought imagination, I seized another book, and there, nestled near the page number, infinitesimally small but undeniable, was the same triangular sigil. I circled it in red ink, my breath catching, hands beginning to shake. The ticking clock on the kitchen wall amplified, each second an echoing beat in the sudden silence. I reached out to Elias, a colleague specializing in rare texts. Feigning nonchalance, I described books marred by peculiar annotations, asking if he might offer an opinion. He arrived, magnifying glass in hand, scrutinizing several pages with academic intensity. The script, he conceded, bore resemblance to certain archaic linguistic forms, yet remained stubbornly unidentifiable. He inquired about their origin. I hesitated, then fabricated a tale of an estate sale discovery. He suggested consulting a professor renowned for expertise in ancient languages at the university nearby. I nodded agreement, harboring no intention of making the call. A growing unease warned against drawing further attention to these notes. They felt unnervingly personal, as if composed by a hand reaching out specifically to me. Day by day, the markings grew audacious. I'd open a cookbook, a travel guide, only to find entire paragraphs overwritten in the twisting script. The pencil lines deepened, asserted themselves with unnerving confidence. Sometimes late at night, I'd hear it, a faint, dry scratching, like graphite whispering across paper, always ceasing the instant I strained to listen. Sleep offered little respite, dissolving into fragmented nightmares populated by the corridor's monstrous depictions. I'd wake drenched in sweat, heart hammering, attuned to every innocuous creak of the floorboards, every groan of the plumbing. The house itself felt watchful. The memory of the hidden room, the sketches, the chained door became a persistent, gnawing presence. Had I disturbed something? Had my curiosity tethered some unseen influence to me? I tried to dismiss the thought, but it lingered like a chill. In desperation, I gathered the afflicted books, locking them away in a sturdy chest stored in the attic, hoping distance might sever the connection. The following morning, ascending the attic stairs to check, I found the chest gaping open. My books rested calmly on their usual shelves downstairs. I stood frozen, a cold film of sweat beading on my forehead. I knew I had locked that chest. The key remained undisturbed in my dresser drawer. Retreating slowly, I closed the attic door, descended the stairs, my mind reeling, jaw clenched tight. Splashing cold water on my face in the kitchen did little to quell the rising panic. I gripped the sink's edge until my knuckles shone white. My own home felt alien, compromised. Rationalizations surfaced. Perhaps I'd forgotten locking it. Perhaps I'd unconsciously returned the books. But they crumbled against the chilling certainty in my core. That afternoon, selecting a random paperback from the living room shelf, an old detective novel, I forced myself to open it. My heart thumped a heavy rhythm against my ribs. Page after page, the margins crawled with the now familiar twisted lettering. My eyes scanned the invasive script, and then, abruptly, a pattern emerged. One specific configuration of symbols repeated insistently across multiple pages. I couldn't decipher the surrounding text, but this single cluster resonated, felt almost like a word. Return, or something hauntingly close. The meaning, perhaps not even English, struck like a command. My mouth turned to dust. There was no choice. I had to go back. Flashlight, pry bar, gloves. Necessities only. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I drove the now familiar route to the derelict manor. The broken gate sagged as before. The basement entrance remained unsecured. Descending the steps toward the hidden repository, the same cold air embraced me. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing the corridor's entrance still agape. The discarded chains pooled on the flagstones. Stepping inside, pulse throbbing in my temples, the musty, damp odor filled my nostrils. I advanced toward the small chamber at the corridor's end. The stone table stood sentinel, littered with its disturbing pages. The walls felt closer, pressing inward. I scanned the scattered sheets again, searching for any echo of the word, the command, glimpsed in my own book. My light illuminated the same vile anatomies, the same contorted forms. And then, beneath the table, half hidden, lay a new page. Crouching, I retrieved it. More script, darker this time, the ink possessing a wet sheen, disturbingly fresh. My hand shook violently as I recognized recurring shapes, mirroring the annotations plaguing my books at home. A faint scuffing sound erupted behind me. I spun around, light stabbing into the narrow passage. Empty, yet the sensation of being watched, palpable and intense, raised the hairs on my scalp. Edging forward, I swept the beam across the room's periphery. Stillness. Taking a ragged breath, I tucked the newly found page into my jacket. My heart hammered with such force I felt it reverberate in my skull. One final sweeping glance at the inscrutable volumes lining the walls. Then I turned to flee. I kept casting glances over my shoulder, paranoia screaming that something followed. My foot snagged on an uneven stone. I stumbled, crashing my knee against the floor. Pain flared, sharp and white-hot. Stifling a cry, I limped from the corridor, scrambled up the stairs, fled the basement. The oaken door remained open behind me. Locking it felt utterly irrelevant. Escape was the only imperative. Back in my house, tension coiled in every muscle, my shirt clinging with cold sweat. I withdrew the page from my jacket. The script sprawled across it, long lines intersecting at bizarre angles. At the very bottom, stark and small, resided the inverted triangle sigil. My mouth was parched. I flung the page onto the kitchen table, pacing, unable to settle, my pulse refusing to slow. Eventually, a fragile calm allowed closer inspection. I noticed faint indentations along the edges, as if the writer had wielded their implement with ferocious pressure. Turning it over revealed a subtle marking on the reverse, a handprint. smaller than mine, yet the fingers seemed unnaturally elongated. I traced its outline with a fingertip. The paper felt unnervingly cold, almost damp to the touch. I dropped it as if burned. My thoughts spun in a vortex of confusion and profound dread. Now every book I open reveals more. The notes metastasize, filling entire chapters, swirling around the printed text like parasitic vines. Their meaning remains opaque, yet they emanate a palpable urgency. Sometimes in the quiet solitude of my room, I hear that soft, insistent scratching. I leap from bed searching, finding nothing but empty air. Gooseflesh blooms on my arms, my legs feel unsteady. I anticipate a figure coalescing from the shadows, but only the familiar contours of my hallway, my living room meet my gaze. Reading has become an act of terror. Relaxation is a forgotten luxury. My thoughts circle endlessly back to that subterranean corridor, the chained alcove, the nightmare sketches. How does one stop this? The notes manifest irrespective of my will, and the prospect of their continued proliferation, their growing strength is unbearable. Burning the books crosses my mind, a desperate Pyrrhic solution, but fear holds me back. Fear that destruction might provoke something worse. So I endure day after haunted day, attuned to the sound of invisible pencils, confronted by messages in a language that mocks my comprehension. My hands tremble whenever I approach a cover, bracing for fresh lines, new symbols, more demands I cannot possibly understand. I feel ensnared, irrevocably altered. It seems I breached a boundary in that underground library, crossed a threshold from which there is no retreat. This is my reality now. No answers, only proliferating questions and a quiet, persistent terror. Every blank surface holds a latent threat. Every nocturnal rustle stills my breath. I cling to the fading hope that one morning I will awaken to silence, that the words and the scribbles will have evaporated like a bad dream, but they remain, etched into my books, imprinted on my psyche, filling my waking hours with dread. I cannot shake the conviction that I initiated something I was never meant to conclude.